Hello everyone, and welcome to Cleared to Land. On this episode, we're going to explore in detail how a brand new Boeing 737 lost both of its engines to hail over Louisiana, and how all 45 people on board still walked away onto a strip of grass on top of a flood levee. These engines had passed their water test with a 400% margin. 30 seconds into the hail, both of them were dead. Flight 110 was descending through 16,000 feet into New Orleans, inside a storm carrying 25 to 30 grams of water per cubic meter of air. That is a rainfall rate of about 30 inches an hour. 4 minutes later, the crew told air traffic control what they had left. They were being optimistic. Both engines had already quit, and the attempts to restart them were about to melt the turbines out of each one. 45 people were on board. Every one of them walked away, onto a strip of grass on top of a flood levee. TACA International Flight 110 was a scheduled run up the spine of Central America. San Salvador, a stop at Belize City, then across the Gulf of Mexico to New Orleans. The airplane was a Boeing 737-300, and it was almost brand new. It had first flown that January and had been carrying passengers for about 2 weeks. Under the wings were two CFM56-3 engines, at that point one of the most successful engine programs in the world. In the left seat was Captain Carlos Dardano, 29 years old, with about 13,400 hours. He had lost an eye to crossfire during the Civil War in El Salvador and flew with a medical waiver. Beside him was First Officer Dionisio Lopez, and on the jump seat a third pilot, an instructor, riding along to watch how the new airplane behaved. They came down out of 35,000 feet, with the weather radar showing green and yellow across the arrival and isolated cells painting red. Red means avoid. They picked a gap between two of them and flew for it. Coming through 30,000 feet, they did the two things the book asked for: engine anti-ice on and continuous ignition selected, a setting that keeps a spark running in the combustor so that if the flame goes out, it relights immediately. This crew was not caught unprepared. They had the ignition on before they entered the weather. It made no difference at all. At about 16,000 feet, the airplane went into hail. Not through it, into it. It stayed there for 30 seconds. In that half minute, both engines rolled back and then failed completely. Not one, then the other. Both. To understand why, you have to know something the industry did not know in 1988. Hail and rain do not behave the same way inside a jet engine. A turbofan sends most of the air it swallows around the outside of the core. Liquid water is light and easily pushed around, so it mostly follows the air, and the spinning fan throws out what is left. Hail does not. The investigators' word for it was ballistic. Hail travels like a bullet, ignores the curve of the inlet, and either slips between the fan blades untouched, or hits the spinner cone and bounces straight down the throat of the core. And the conditions that make that worst are high altitude, high airspeed, and low fan speed, because it is fan speed that flings hail outward. A jet descending is all three at once. Once enough water is moving through the core, the ratio of water to air overwhelms the ratio of fuel to air that combustion needs. The fire goes out, and it cannot be relit until the water clears, which inside a storm it does not. The continuous ignition the crew had switched on was firing the whole time. There was nothing it could light. So they had a 737 at 16,000 feet with two dead engines, and they did what any crew does first. They tried a windmill restart, letting the airflow spin the engines fast enough to get them going again. It did not work, and it did permanent damage. The spool speeds were too low and the engines were still swallowing water, so instead of lighting cleanly, they ran hot, past the temperature limits, and turbine components were destroyed. Next, they started the auxiliary power unit, the small turbine in the tail. That got the electrics and the hydraulics back and gave them a proper starter to turn the engines with. And this time, both engines lit. They just would not accelerate. The water was still coming in faster than the fire could deal with, so each engine sat there, burning, refusing to spool up to idle. Temperatures climbed past red line and stayed there. Turbine metal melted. The crew pushed the throttles and got no response at all, so they made the decision that probably saved the airplane. They shut both engines down. Whatever thrust they were hoping for was not coming, and continuing to run them was going to start a fire. The engine manufacturer's own conclusion afterwards is one of the quieter findings in this story. It is harder to start an engine in heavy precipitation than it is to keep one running in the same precipitation. And here is the part that makes this an engineering story rather than a weather story. It had happened before. 9 months earlier, an Air Europe 737 with the same CFM 56-3 engines was descending toward Salonika in Greece. At 8,900 feet, it flew into sudden intense hail, and both engines flamed out simultaneously. The pilot's description of what he had flown into was a wall of ice. That crew got both engines windmill started and landed without further trouble. Nobody was hurt. It was the first report of thrust loss in severe precipitation anywhere in the 737 fleet, after 3 years of service and roughly 1.5 million flight hours. The investigation concluded that the weather had exceeded the flame-out margin of the engine, and that a water concentration like that had a low probability of occurring. In other words, the airplane was fine, the engine was fine, the weather was freakish, and the focus stayed on rain, not hail. 9 months later, at 16,000 feet over Louisiana, the same engines went out for the same reason, on an airplane with 45 people in it and no ability to restart. Below them was New Orleans East. Water, marsh, canals, and the sprawl of the city they were gliding toward without an engine running. Air traffic control offered them a closer airport. It was not close enough. A 737 with both engines shut down is a glider with a fixed amount of altitude to spend, and the arithmetic did not work. So the crew began setting up to ditch, to put the airplane into a waterway east of the city, wings level, in one piece if they could manage it. Then they came out of the bottom of the cloud, and there was a levee. Flood levees in southern Louisiana are long, straight, flat-topped earth embankments covered in mown grass. This one ran alongside the NASA Michoud assembly facility, the plant that built the first stages of the Saturn rockets, about 20 miles east of the airport. The top of it was roughly 6,000 feet of level ground. It was not a runway. It was the only flat, straight, unobstructed surface within gliding distance, and the first officer saw it. The captain still had too much height and too much speed, and no engines to adjust either with. So he side-slipped, crossing the controls to skid the airplane sideways through the air, using the fuselage itself as a brake. It is a technique taught in light aircraft. It is not something anybody practices in an airliner. He flew it down onto the grass and stopped it on the levee. The hail had beaten up the radome in the nose and the engines were finished, but the airframe was in one piece and there was no fire. 38 passengers and 7 crew were on board. The official record on injuries reads, "In full, there were none." Because nobody was hurt and the airplane was repairable, the safety board did not classify this as an accident. It was an incident, which means there is no blue accident report and no public docket, just a factual report and a brief of incident. The finding in that brief is one sentence, and it does something briefs rarely do. It names the regulator. A double-engine flameout due to water ingestion, which occurred as a result of an in-flight encounter with an area of very heavy rain and hail. A contributing cause of the incident was the inadequate design of the engines and the FAA water ingestion certification standards, which did not reflect the waterfall rates that can be expected in moderate or higher intensity thunderstorms. The inadequate design of the engines and the FAA certification standards. The board is saying the rule itself was wrong. And it was. When this engine was certified, hail was a damage test. You fired a volley of hailstones sized to the engine inlet and checked whether anything broke. Nobody asked whether an engine could keep running in hail. Hail was understood as something that dents metal, not as something that puts fires out. As for that 400% margin, it was wrong. The test had been run at low simulated aircraft speed and high engine speed, a combination that centrifuges water away from the core. The test had been protecting the very part of the engine it was supposed to be challenging. The corrections came fast. 6 days after the levee, the FAA rewrote the 737 flight manual procedures for severe rain and hail. 3 weeks later, a second directive moved the change into the limitations section, requiring a minimum engine speed of 45% and ignition kept on in heavy precipitation. Raise the idle, keep the spark lit, tell the crews to stay out. By February 1991, a further directive mandated the hardware fix: a new fan splitter, a new fairing, extra bleed doors to dump water out of the core, and a reshaped spinner so that hail striking the center of the fan is thrown outward instead of bouncing inward. But directives only fix the engines that already exist. The larger question was what the standard should have been in the first place, and that took 10 years. An Aerospace Industries Association task force was convened to work out what rain and hail an engine actually has to survive. Their study was finished in June 1990. On the 26th of March, 1998, it became law, Amendment 33-19, at Volume 63 of the Federal Register, page 14,794. It stripped hail and water out of the old damage rule. It created a new one, 33.78 rain and hail ingestion, built around a storm so severe an engine should only meet it about once in 100 million flight hours. And it added Appendix B, tables giving the concentrations of rain and hail an engine must be tested against, altitude by altitude. Here is the sentence at the center of the new rule. Acceptable engine operation precludes flameout, run down, continued or non-recoverable surge or stall, or loss of acceleration and deceleration capability during any 3-minute continuous period in rain and during any 30-second continuous period in hail. 30 seconds in hail. Flight 110 was in hail for 30 seconds. And at the bottom of every table in Appendix B there is the same footnote, still printed in the regulations today. Source of data: Aerospace Industries Association Propulsion Committee Study, Project PC 338-1, June 1990. That is the study convened because of this flight. The numbers a jet engine is certified against today are the answer to a question this airplane asked on a levee in Louisiana. 30 seconds of hail. 2 engines that lit but would not run. A warning 9 months earlier that was written off as freak weather, and a strip of mown grass on a flood wall that happened to be 6,000 feet long. The airplane did not even stay there. They replaced the engines where it sat, towed it to the NASA plant, put the minimum fuel in it, and flew it out down a road built on top of a wartime runway. It went back to work and flew for another 28 years. 45 people boarded that airplane in Belize. 45 walked away in Louisiana. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. If you'd like to support the channel, please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.